name is Andrew Cohen. I work in the Office of Undergraduate Admission. I get to work with visitors when you all come visit us on campus, but also help provide information about Georgia Tech virtually, like tonight. And excited to work with our colleagues here in the Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid to put on this webinar. And so without further ado, I want to turn it over to our Executive Director within the Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid, Katie Conrad, who's going to share more about the financial aid process here at Georgia Tech and wherever you might be applying. So take it away, Katie.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I wanted to start off by saying I am a mother of a first-year college student. So all of you parents who are joining me, I appreciate where you are, and I understand that it is a very difficult year for many reasons. And I hope that tonight will at least alleviate some of the concerns you have about the financial aid process. Um, Best wishes to all of you. It is a fun and challenging year ahead. Okay, so what we will be doing tonight is talking about all of the different types and categories of financial aid. We'll talk about the cost of attendance and what that means, along with the Student Aid Index, or SAI, what it means to demonstrate financial need in the eyes of the Financial Aid Office. We'll talk about the different applications that you'll need to complete to apply for financial aid, including the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, the College Board's CSS profile, and then we'll also talk about all of the grants and scholarships that are available at the federal level and the state level as well. So let's dig right in. What is financial aid? It consists of any of the funds that are provided to students and families to help pay for college expenses. And they'll really come in two different forms, two different categories, gift aid and self-help aid. On the gift aid side, this is where you'll have your scholarships and grants. And that word gift is exactly what it means. It means you don't have to pay it back. There's scholarships and grants that do not have to be repaid. Self-help aid, on the other hand, has something that you have to do to receive it. The student loans, of course, are loans that have to be repaid. And then the work study employment is work that you would actually do and earn an hourly wage to help cover some of your educational expenses. And we'll talk more about all of these things in a bit. Okay, that first type of gift aid is grants or need-based aid. They come from federal sources. Many of you have heard of the federal Pell Grant. Some of you probably haven't heard of the FSEOG, which stands for Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. I always say that there's a very obvious reason that we abbreviate that. Those are the two federal grant funds that we participate in. There are also funds that are provided by the institution where you plan to attend. And of course, those grants are going to vary based on the institution where you go. The second type of gift aid are scholarships. And scholarships are based on some kind of merit. And they come from three different sources. You can have private scholarships, state scholarships, and institutional scholarships. The private scholarships are going to come from foundations and businesses, your churches, the different types of organizations that you might belong to in your community. With these, there are large scholarship websites that are national scholarship searches. I always encourage students and families to look more locally, do those big ones as well, but look to your community to see if there are scholarships that you can apply for. At Georgia Tech, we have lots of outside scholarship, private scholarships that come to our students. We also have two different state scholarships in the state of Georgia. I am certain that most of you in Georgia are familiar with the Hope Scholarship and the Zell Miller Scholarship. You may not be as familiar with the Hero Scholarship. This is available to members of the Georgia National Guard and military reservists who have been in a combat zone, and also to their children and spouses. You can read more about that on the state website. We also have institutional scholarships, and these, of course, are provided by the institution where you plan to attend, and those are usually based on some form of academic merit or talent. Moving into that self-help aid, we have federal work study. This provides part-time employment to the students who have financial need, who qualify. Um, These jobs do encourage community service. We have students who are working out in the public school system as tutors and doing different types of community service activities. We also like to do work on campus that relates to the student's course of study. So there are lots of opportunities to participate in work study jobs on campus. The key here is that this is a smaller bucket of money. So we do have limited funding for this. So this is yet another reason that I'm going to point out for you to make sure that you apply early for financial aid. The second type of self-help aid that we talk about is the federal undergraduate student loans. There are 3 different types of loans that are currently available to students and to parents. The first 2 that you see there, the subsidized and unsubsidized loans, are loans that are provided to the student, and the student is responsible for repayment of those. The first one, the subsidized loan, is based on financial need, and it has an interest rate for this year of 6.39%. The difference between the subsidized and the unsubsidized student loan is that the unsubsidized loan does accrue interest while the student is enrolled in school. The subsidized loan, the interest is subsidized by the government while the student is enrolled in school. The unsubsidized loan is not based on financial need. You must just complete the FAFSA to qualify for the unsubsidized loan. The Federal Parent Plus loan is a loan that's borrowed in the parent's name to cover the costs of education for the student, the dependent student. It is based on credit worthiness, so the parent does have to apply and be approved for that loan, and it carries an interest rate of 8.94%. The parent loan has an annual loan limit of $20,000 for the year and an aggregate or a lifetime maximum of $65,000. So that is not an unlimited source of funding as of this July. The federal student loans also have limits, both annual limits and aggregate or lifetime limits. And you can see the breakdown on this slide. We'll concentrate on the undergraduate first year student, which most of you would be. Your first year, if you qualify based on financial need, you could borrow up to $3,500 for the year in a subsidized loan, and then an additional $2,000 in an unsubsidized loan. If a student completes the FAFSA and it's determined that you don't qualify for the subsidized need-based loan, you would be able to borrow the full $5,500 in an unsubsidized loan. And then you can see down at the bottom of the slide what the aggregate limits are for those loans. Next, we're going to cover cost of attendance, or COA. And I like to explain this as it is an estimate of what we think it will cost for you to be enrolled as a student. That will include costs that are direct costs and also indirect costs. So the direct costs are things that would show up on your student account, on your bill, billed by the institute. So obviously that's going to be the tuition and fees. And if you choose to live on campus and have a meal plan, then it would include housing and food. And then, of course, books, course materials, supplies, and equipment that you would purchase at the bookstore would also be included as direct costs. Indirect costs are things that we know it's going to cost for you to be a student, but you're not going to be paying them directly to Georgia Tech. So things like transportation, getting to and from school, or traveling to and from a job off campus, going home for holidays, things like that. And then, of course, other personal expenses. Um, I have joked that this category of personal miscellaneous expenses became very real to me when I sent my daughter to live in college housing. They're expenses that you don't expect. um, so make sure you're planning for those personal miscellaneous expenses, such as bedding and the ottoman that you're going to need to get up on top of your high bed, and towels and shampoo and all of those things that you may not be expecting, but are part of that total cost of attendance for being a student. All right, so let's put that cost of attendance to actual numbers so that you understand exactly what we're talking about. The top boxes in the lighter gray color are those direct costs, things that would be billed to your student account. So tuition, mandatory student fees, first year housing allowance. So this is just, again, an estimate of what your first year housing on campus would be. And then, of course, first year food service plan, if you choose to have a food service plan on campus. Those would be things that would be billed to your account. The other things in that, the bottom section, to me, it looks kind of green. Those are the indirect costs, things that aren't necessarily charged to your student account. Of course, books, you can, there's a way to do that with the bookstore, but these are things that you would be paying for out of your pocket and not applied directly to your bill. So you can see that for a Georgia resident, the total cost of attendance for the year is $30,722. And of course, not all of that will be direct costs that you have to pay the Institute. And then you can see the breakdown of what it would be for non-Georgia residents, so an out-of-state tuition cost, and then of course the out-of-country tuition costs as well. Each year, the tuition is set by the Board of Regents for the University System of Georgia. So these are our estimated costs for the 26-27 academic year. We'll receive the final tuition costs later in the year. The next term I want to talk about is the Student Aid Index, or SAI. And this is the figure that is calculated using the information that you provide on your FAFSA. What it is not. The SAI is not the amount of money that your family is going to have to pay for college, and it is not the amount of federal student aid that you will receive. The only thing that that number is used for is to calculate the amount of federal student aid that you're eligible to receive. It truly is just an index that we use to calculate need. So what does that mean? What is financial need? We've talked about cost of attendance. You just learned what the student aid index is. So this is the very, very simple calculation of financial need. It's the total cost of attendance minus the student aid index leaves you with the financial need, which is what we would use to determine your eligibility for need-based financial aid. So how do we get that SAI? The application is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. And for the first time in a couple of years, the FAFSA opened on time, and it actually opened prior to October 1st this year. And it continues to be open, of course. The FAFSA uses prior tax year data. So the information that will be populated on the FAFSA is actually from your 2024 federal tax returns. You want to make sure that you're completing your FAFSA early, and we'll talk about the deadline here in a moment, but the earlier you apply, the more likely you're ensuring that you maximize your eligibility for the limited sources of funding. Georgia Tech is is not unique. We do have a deadline. Most schools will have a priority deadline. So make sure you're paying attention to all of the deadlines for financial aid at the various institutions where you're planning to attend. Obviously, we hope you plan to attend Georgia Tech. And our deadline to apply for Georgia Tech financial aid is January 31st. So if you hear nothing else that I say tonight, please remember the deadline to apply for financial aid at Georgia Tech is January 31st. Now, if you are applying for summer 2026 admission, you will also need to complete the 25-26 FAFSA in addition to the 26-27 FAFSA. And that 25-26 FAFSA will be available through June 30th of 2026. The key deadline, again, the January 31st. Even if you're admitted for the summer term, we just need to be able to receive all of your financial aid applications for the 26-27 academic year by that January 31st deadline. I hope that wasn't too confusing. So where do you go to complete the FAFSA? Just about everything you need to know about the application process and all of the federal aid processes you can find at studentaid.gov. And this is a screenshot of what you'll see when you click on the FAFSA information from that site. And you're going to just click on that very first box there that says Start New Form to do your 26-27 FAFSA form. And underneath that, again, if you have to do the 25-26 FAFSA, you can also click the button below that as well. Both forms are currently available. To start your FAFSA, you have to create an account at the site. And this is creating your Federal Student Aid ID or your FSA ID. And this is what's going to give you access to all of the Federal Student Aid online systems. And it will serve as your electronic signature on anything that you need to do for Federal Student Aid, including the FAFSA and including any of the federal loan documents that you'll need to sign electronically. You create this account at the same site, studentaid.gov. And when you click into Start a New FAFSA, it will immediately take you in to create your account if you haven't already done so. You do have to do this process before you can start completing an online FAFSA. Now, the student has an FSA ID, and anyone who has to contribute to that student's FAFSA has to have their own FSA ID. So as a parent who will be completing the parent section of the FAFSA, you too will have to have your own unique FSA ID. And this is what allows us to do, for the FAFSA to be able to log in and do the direct data exchange on the FAFSA, which we'll talk about next. In order to create that account for the Federal Student Aid ID, each contributor will have to have their full legal name, not your nickname. So I'm Katie Conrad, but I would need to fill this out as Catherine Conrad, right? Full legal name, your date of birth, your social security number, your mailing address, phone number, and email. And with that, you'll also be required to complete the username and a password. And the final step is to set up security and challenge questions and answers when you inevitably forget what your password is. You'll be able to reset your password with those challenge questions. And I wanted to point out this bottom note here. Parents and spouses who don't have a social security number will still be able to create an FSA ID to log into the FAFSA to provide their information. And the little arrow is pointing down to the blue text that says, what if I don't have a social security number? And if you click that down arrow in the application, it will have you answer some additional questions to be able to create your account online without a social security number. And again, that would just be for parents and spouses. Students themselves need to have a social security number. Within the FAFSA, to pull in the tax information, they are using the IRS Direct Data Exchange. And this allows the contributors to directly receive federal tax information from the IRS database to populate the FAFSA. So while you're completing the application, you're not going to be, you don't need to actually go in and manually enter your tax information. That direct data exchange will pull the information from the IRS database. It authenticates your identity with the valid Social Security number or the ITIN. This makes sure that the information that is being used to determine eligibility is accurate and exactly what the IRS has. It also reduces the documentation that we may need to collect to verify the information on your application. Okay, so that covers the FAFSA. The next application that you'll need to complete is the College Board's CSS profile. This is required for all first-year students and new transfer students who want to be considered for need-based aid from Georgia Tech. So our institutional funds, we require the CSS profile. So any of those need-based scholarships and grants, you also have to have the CSS profile. For our Georgia residents who are just applying for federal funds or for the HOPE scholarship and Zell Miller scholarship, it's not required. The profile is not required for those who just want HOPE or Zell. You can see here the URL for the College Board profile site. You'll click on the little white button on that screenshot to sign in to the fall 2026, spring 2027 application to start the process. You will need some additional information to complete the profile because they do not have a direct data exchange with the IRS. So you're going to have to create a username and password to sign up for a new account with the College Board. You'll have to indicate that you want that information sent to Georgia Tech. So you can see our school code, which you also can just search from their site, but it is 5248. And you'll need a copy of your most recently completed tax returns. So depending on when you're completing the application, it may be a different tax return. And then your prior year tax data. So your 2024 tax return, which should mirror what is being reported on your FAFSA. You'll also need copies of your W-2 forms and other records of current year income, as well as any records of untaxed income and benefits that you may have. You'll want to have copies of your bank statements and any assets that you have. There is a $25 application fee for the CSS profile. However, it is automatically waived by the College Board if you have an adjusted gross income up to $100,000. There is no special code that you need from us. It's automatically waived by the College Board for AGIs less than $100,000. Okay, moving into everyone's favorite topic, which is the scholarship. I'm sorry, we're not actually talking about scholarships yet. We're talking about the application still. This is the third application that we'd like for you to complete to apply for financial aid, which is the Georgia Tech application for scholarships and financial aid. We call that the GT app. It has to be completed annually for all students at Georgia Tech who wish to receive any kind of financial aid, whether it's federal, state, or institutional aid. It's really just a very short questionnaire that helps us understand what your housing status is going to be. Are you going to live on campus, off campus, or with your parents? It helps us build that cost of attendance so that we can create a financial aid offer based on the types of aid that you desire and your housing situation as well. So this is also an application that is required to be completed by the January 31st deadline. And this one has to be completed each year. And it's available on the financial aid website. Okay, now we're going to talk about the scholarships that are available at Georgia Tech. We do have two different types of scholarships, merit-based scholarships and need-based scholarships. I have them listed out. The merit-based scholarships are the Stamps President's Scholarship, the Gold Scholarship, Provost Scholarship, which is only available for out-of-state students because it waives the out-of-state portion of the tuition. Dean scholarships that are awarded by the different colleges, the Hope and Zell Miller Scholarship for Georgia residents. Those are all based on merit. Our need-based scholarships are the Tech Promise Scholarship. This is available only to Georgia residents, and the Valsal Scholarship for Georgia residents. And this is for students who demonstrate financial need who are graduating as the valedictorian or salutatorian of their high school. We also have other various institutional need-based scholarships and grants that are awarded based on that financial need calculation. And you have the URL there to do a little bit more research on what those scholarships entail. Okay, if you're from out of state, you can tune me out for just a moment, but we're going to come back to more important information too. So, but this is where we're going to talk a little bit about our state scholarship programs for Georgia. For Georgia residents, we have the Hope Scholars and the Zell Miller Scholars. Hope requires that you graduate from an eligible high school with at least a 3.0 GPA. You have to meet the Hope Georgia residency requirements. You also have to be a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen. You have to be enrolled as a degree-seeking student at an eligible institution, and you have to be registered for selective service if required. So if you are male, you have to be registered for selective service once you turn 18 years of age. For the Zell Miller Scholar, all of those same eligibility requirements, the difference being that you have to graduate from an eligible high school with at least a 3.7 GPA and receive at least a 1200 SAT or a 25 ACT on a single administration of those exams. Or you have to graduate from an eligible high school as the valedictorian or salutatorian with at least a 3.0 GPA. The hyperlink at the bottom of the screen is for the Georgia Student Financial Aid Application, or the GSF apps. And this is the state application for Georgia residents who just want to be considered for the Hope or Zell Miller Scholarship. So what do Hope and Zell scholarships cover? For Zell Miller, it includes all tuition charges. It does not cover fees. For the Hope Scholarship, it covers $350.40 per credit hour and doesn't include fees. To maintain eligibility for these scholarship programs, for Zell Miller, you have to maintain at least a 3.3 college GPA. And for Hope, you have to maintain at least a 3.0 college GPA. We do have checkpoints for the Hope and Zell Miller scholarship programs that occur at 30 credit hours, 60 credit hours, and 90 credit hours attempted after each spring semester. So, and I also just wanted to point out that these figures are based on the eligibility for 25-26. If there are any new amounts or new rules posted for 26-27, we'll know that later in the year. But this is definitely a good estimate. So for my Georgia residents who really don't want to complete the profile, really don't want to complete the FAFSA, and you really just want your Zell Miller or Hope Scholarship, there is a process for you. We need you to complete that Georgia Tech Scholarship and Financial Aid Application, or the GT app. We still would like for you to complete that annually for us to be able to process your Hope and Zell Miller. You also need to complete that GSF apps application at gafutures.org. This application you just have to complete once. It's good for 10 years. So if you really truly only want to have Hope or Zell, this is the application that you need to complete. You'll do that one time, and then you'll complete the GT app for us in the financial aid office each year. So you're applying for aid as a first year student. Here are your important dates. So in October, October 1st, the FAFSA, the GT app, and the CSS profile became available to you. So those all applications are currently open and ready for you to complete. Here's that January 31st deadline. If you hear nothing else, I'm telling you again, the deadline to submit the GT application, the CSS profile, and the FAFSA to be considered for Georgia Tech grants and scholarships, those have to be submitted by January 31st, all three applications. Students tend to have a little bit of a lull in March and April. And during that time, as you're considering where you want to attend school, you also need to be continuing to search for those outside scholarship opportunities, those private scholarships that we talked about, those national databases, and within your community looking for those scholarship opportunities. Sometime in early April and possibly before, you will receive your financial aid notification telling you what you're eligible to receive as a student at Georgia Tech. May 1st, of course, is that admission deposit deadline. So that is decision day. We want to make sure that you have all of the information that you need to make a good decision prior to that date. So all of that to say, please complete your applications early. Get your information in as quickly as possible, which then allows us to follow up with you if we have, excuse me, any additional questions for you, any additional information we need to verify the information on your applications, so that you're not pressed up against a deadline of not having a financial aid offer to be able to make those decisions on making your admission deposit. Lastly, I just want to provide our contact information. We are located on the 3rd floor of the Billmore Student Success Center. So if you've been here to visit and been to the admission office, that is our building. We're on the 3rd floor. Our office hours are 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. So you're welcome to visit us here in the office. We also have an email address and a telephone number for you to reach us. And then I really encourage you to visit our website, finaid@gatech.edu. You'll find far more information than we're able to cover here in 30 minutes or an hour, to read more about all of the applications and about the aid that's available to you as a student at Georgia Tech. And with that, I think I'll invite Andrew to come back and stop sharing here, and we may have some time for some questions.
Hey everyone, well, welcome back. For those of you that were not on when I joined, my name is Andrew Cohen. I work in the Office of Undergraduate Admission and just want to thank Katie so much for going through that. I always enjoy hearing Katie talk about financial aid. For the times I hear it, I still learn new things. So thank you. And as you were going, I was jotting some things down that I think can be helpful to kind of chat a little bit about. And I think the first thing to talk through is that timeline and talking about it a little bit with admission as well. So there were a lot of questions about when will we get decisions and things like that, right? So many of you that maybe are joining today have already submitted an application to Georgia Tech for admission, right? Many of you maybe applied for one of our early action deadlines, early action 1 for our Georgia residents or early action 2 for non-Georgia residents. Just to kind of put it in perspective, admission decisions for early action 1 typically are released in December, and we'll let you know a couple weeks beforehand, but those will be released on a specific date and time, and you will know that well before that decision release. For early action two, those non-Georgia students that applied just a week or two ago, typically towards the end of January is when you will hear an answer. And really, we're not able to confirm that because we are holistically reviewing your applications right now, and we need to see how long that's going to take us to get through. And so when it gets closer, when we know we will be able to get through all those files, we will let you know again that date and time, which does mean that you might receive that admission decision pretty close to that January 31st deadline. And so why we encourage you to get started, get that Georgia Tech account activated to fill out the GT app, as well as those others. Um, the other part, and we'll kind of pass this off to Katie. There's a lot of questions regarding merit scholarships and what needs to be done to be considered for merit scholarships. And so that one I would love to hear, and we'll jump back in afterwards, Katie, to share anything more from kind of the admission perspective.
Sure. The answer to that question is really, really simple. You have to apply for admission. Your application for admission is also your application for all of the merit-based scholarships.
Yeah, exactly. So you already shared so much information with us. And so those groups on campus that might have scholarship programs, like those Dean Scholars that Katie just mentioned, are going to use that information that you've already provided. Nothing else will need to be submitted. Let's also talk too about, I guess, you mentioned it earlier, and I think this is an important point, talking a little bit about summer. And I think that's a unique piece for the financial aid process, but also our Georgia Tech students. We enroll about 500 to 600 students that start Georgia Tech in the summer, right? Usually late June into July. Some students will receive an admission decision to start in the summer, but many also switch to start and participate in one of our summer programs, like our Ignite program or our first year semester abroad program that will start on campus in the summer. And so, Katie, can you just clarify again, January 31st, what is needed? And then to follow up, if you end up starting in the summer, what is needed later on?
Very good question. I was afraid that I didn't explain that incredibly well when I got to that slide. So we always like to come back and see if we can clarify that. Right now, be concerned about the 26-27 applications, the FAFSA, the CSS profile, and the GT app. That has a deadline of the January 31st. Once you receive an admission decision, and if you decide that you're going to be a summer start student, and that's what your admission decision says, or that's what you decide you want to do so that you can do a first year study abroad program, excuse me, then go back and complete the 25-26 FAFSA. It doesn't hurt to do it now if you want to just get it out of the way, but it's not really necessary unless you're going to be enrolled for the summer term.
Great. Thank you for
Once,
clarifying.
once you do one FAFSA, the second one is super easy.
Yeah. What I also say about the GT app, once you do the FAFSA and the CSS profile, the GT app takes you
That's
probably five,
nothing.
10 minutes or so. So definitely make sure to get that in. The other question, and I think our admission staff always get this, and I've seen this come up quite a bit in the Q&A. And if a student and a family doesn't think they might get any financial aid, what would you recommend them doing? That question in some way form showed up a few times, and so what do we recommend to a student who doesn't think they will qualify but is clearly here and clearly has questions? And so what would you recommend for them to do?
Apply. It does not take that much time to complete the FAFSA. I always encourage students for their first year, complete the FAFSA, complete the CSS profile. If it is determined that you didn't have any financial need, there's nothing that says you have to continue to complete the FAFSA each year. But for that first year, let's get a baseline and see what you may be eligible for. There are programs, the Federal Unsubsidized Student Loan Program. doesn't require financial need. So even if you think you don't qualify for any aid, you at least qualify for the loan program through the unsubsidized loan. So I do encourage you to go ahead for the first year at least to complete all 3 of the applications.
That's the best piece of advice. I think the two takeaways, right, is apply and apply by January
January
1st.
31st. Thank you.
Yes, I think that that is the most important takeaway. Also thinking too, and just to reiterate, students who really are only thinking about Hope and Zell, can you just remind us again what do those students need to do if they just want to be considered for the Hope or Zell Miller scholarship?
Okay, so if you're not going to take our advice and complete the FAFSA, then if you just know that all you're applying for is your Hope and or Zell scholarship, then you have to complete the GSF apps, which is the state application at GA Futures website. That is good for 10 years. You have to complete that and the GT app so that we understand what your intentions are of applying for financial aid. And that application still needs to be completed each year. But once you do the GSF app, that's good for your time here.
Oh, great, thank you. I know there were some people who have already submitted their applications or have started them, which is great to hear. What happens if a student realizes that they might have made a mistake on the information that was shared? What should they do in that situation?
Great
And that might
question.
be different depending on the type of application, I guess.
Okay, so this might be a little bit longer answer than you were expecting. If you make a mistake, you need to update your address, anything like that on your FAFSA. That is, you log back into that studentaid.gov website, and instead of doing start a new FAFSA, you click the button that says make a correction to an existing FAFSA. Forget exactly what the language is, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You can make a correction to your FAFSA that way. What you can't do is change your income because that has come in from the federal tax information directly linked to the IRS. And we'll get back to that in a moment. If you make a mistake on your CSS profile, you have one opportunity to make a correction to the profile. After that, it's really locked in. So you need to make sure that when you're filling out the profile that you're entering all of the correct information. You can log back in and make one additional correction to that information. Now, if the information that you're required to report on your FAFSA, which is the 2024 federal tax information, if that is no longer reflective of your current financial situation, you can contact our office to inquire about what's called a professional judgment. You have a special circumstance to say, my income is much different now than it was 2 years ago. And can you base my eligibility on my current financial situation? We are able to take those types of considerations into account when we're determining financial aid eligibility. So that is a one-on-one, case-by-case basis to be able to make those adjustments. And you can read more about what will be required and what changes can be made and what can't be made on the financial aid website, the Georgia Tech financial aid website, under special circumstances, professional judgment.
Great, thank you. And again, GT8 app, if there's a change, just to reiterate, that is an email, or is there a way to correct that one?
Oh, wow. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think you can log back in and make an adjustment to your GT app, but honestly, there's not a whole lot to correct on the GT app is pretty straightforward. I think you may actually need to send an email to the financial aid office to update any of that information.
For sure. And like I said before, again, if you have questions or um, need to submit a change or have questions, definitely send an email. And it does look like confirmation. Once that is submitted, it will require an email to be submitted. So
I realized that that was the wrong answer as soon as it came out of my mouth. Thanks, Steve, for correcting me.
Confirmed by our folks helping answer some questions here. So we have covered so much, and so I think to kind of wrap up again, just want to remind everyone that that January 31st deadline is really the crucial one to think about. Yes, that means that you might not have an admission decision at that time, even if you applied early action or regular decision. I didn't say that earlier. Regular decisions are typically in March or so. So just as the admission office is reviewing thousands of admission files, the financial aid team needs to get started in reviewing thousands of financial aid applications as well. And so that does mean you do need to submit those, but before you potentially receive a decision. It also means a reminder too, Katie had that great slide that kind of walked through everything. When you get an admission decision, it will not include any financial aid information, right? All of that stuff will come after, right? Many of you asked questions about the merit scholarships, and we talked about some of those opportunities. That information will come in the weeks following an admission decision, but won't be included at that time when you get an admission decision. And then the reminder too, typically around April 1st, give or take, is when you will receive that financial aid notification, really giving you that month of April to ask more questions, probably have some more webinars, hear from our financial aid folks to learn more and help you understand what it would look like for you to attend Georgia Tech to make that decision by May 1st. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of what that timeline looks like over the next couple of months. But right now, kind of, I know many of you have hit that submit button on Common App and have that application submitted. So really getting that GT account activated, working on that GT app, the CSS profile and the FAFSA are really what's important to focus on right now. So just want to wrap up, Katie, I guess, is there anything else that you would like to share with the group before we wrap up and let everyone go on for the evening?
Just get the 3 applications completed. I promise you, it is not that difficult. The FAFSA truly is a much more simple process than it used to be. So if you've heard horror stories from previous years, it is so much easier than it used to be. Um, just get them submitted so that we can give your students as much financial aid as they're eligible to receive. And we appreciate you being here and learning as much as you can about the process.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Katie. Thank you to our colleagues that have been behind the scenes answering lots of
Thank you.
questions. Almost 200 questions have been answered. But again, the conversation continues on. Feel free to reach out if there are admission questions. Contact the admission office. We're happy to answer those questions. Questions about financial aid. Our Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid are ready to answer those questions as well. But thank you again all for attending tonight.